My partner and I really loved taking weekend camping adventures quite regularly. We lived directly in the Appalachian area of Virginia, so naturally, we would discover new locations on or around the Appalachian Mountains. Both of us had very demanding job situations during weekdays, so escaping into nature and being away from our house on weekends truly helped us. When this incident occurred, we had already completed many camping adventures in the Appalachian Mountains, but none of them had ever concluded like this one. It was Saturday morning, and we chose a very small 3-mile path that goes to a nice, secluded camping area on a flatter section of the mountain. We had never visited this particular location before, but from the number of reviews the path had on Google, we thought it was a fairly well-known trail and camping area. We prepared our bags, loaded the truck with our camping equipment, and then headed out. It was only a 45-minute drive from our place, but as we approached, it started raining quite heavily. This was fairly typical around the mountains here, so we were comfortable being out in the rain, and it did not bother us enough to turn back. We arrived at the trailhead, which was simply just off the side of the road, and we noticed one other vehicle parked on the side. We actually thought there would be more people, considering how popular the trail was. But we were happy it was not busy. However, as we began getting our equipment out, my partner pointed out that the parked car's passenger door was slightly open, a few inches. We both looked around to see if the owner was close by, but with no evidence of them, I decided to walk over and push it shut, as we thought the owner must have mistakenly left it open. The entire passenger seat was drenched from the rain already, but at least it would not get any worse. I returned to our car to grab my equipment, and then we both began making our way down the path. We discussed how strange it was that the door was open, and how most people would likely notice that their car would not even lock because of the open door. It's worth noting, too, that it was clearly a very expensive, newer vehicle, which just made it more odd. Anyway, the rain began picking up at this point, so we started walking faster so we could reach the campsite and set up our tent. I want to say it took us about 2 hours to reach the end, as it was mostly uphill. Once we arrived there, the first thing we saw was a tent already set up in the center of the flat area. It was quite small, definitely a one-person tent. We figured they were likely in there, taking shelter from the rain, so we went to a far corner of the site and set up our tent there. We sat inside for an hour, eating some food we brought, and laying some of our items out to dry, before hearing voices outside. The rain hitting the tent was too loud to hear what they were saying, so I unzipped the front and looked out. I got startled a bit, because there were 2 guys crouching down and staring at us from only a few feet away. But then, they grinned and said hello to us. They told us they were sleeping in the tent in the center, and that they had been here a couple of days. I quickly introduced my girlfriend and myself, and said that we were only here for the night. Then they walked back, and I closed up our tent and glanced at my girlfriend. The entire encounter felt a bit strange. and they appeared to be behaving a bit odd. I saw that both of the guys were wearing tight-fitting jeans and normal t-shirts, and their tent was far too tiny to be holding two adult men. It really did not look like they were here for camping or hiking, and certainly not for a couple of days. Like they had claimed, we chose to leave the zipper partly open so we could watch them, just in case. Another hour passed, and we did not see anything strange. Actually, we did not see anything at all. I think they were just squeezed up in their tent the entire time. Anyway, it was quite dark outside at this point, so we chose to call it a night and get our sleeping bags prepared. I zipped the tent back up and lay down beside my girlfriend. I must have fallen asleep quite fast, though, because I did not even recall anything after lying down. But I woke up a few hours into the night, needing to use the bathroom. It was still raining, so I put on one of my basic plastic rain ponchos so I would not have to go back to bed wet. Then I walked out a few feet behind our tent and behind one of the trees. But through the rain, I could hear talking. It was really difficult to tell where it was coming from, though. I turned my head all around, looking in every direction, as I began to get a little nervous. But I did not see anyone. Then I looked over at the tiny tent in the center and saw the front zipper was open. It was difficult to see in the darkness and through the rain, but I was quite sure that nobody was in there. I knew that the guys had said they were spending the night in the tent, so this began to get me even more concerned. I ran over to my tent and shook my girlfriend awake and explained the situation. She was clearly tired, but I could tell she was just as concerned as I was. As we were talking about what to do, we both heard it, talking, coming from behind our tent. I was not sure what to do, but I knew sitting in the tent did not feel very safe anymore. I said to my girlfriend, "Pack the bags, fast, and be ready to leave if we have to." Then I grabbed a small pocket knife and quickly got out and looked over at the trees. I saw the two guys from earlier standing there, only a few feet from our tent. I recall this moment very clearly, as both guys looked at me with completely no emotion. Then I looked over at the tiny tent in the center and saw the front zipper was open. It was difficult to see in the darkness and through the rain, but I was quite sure that nobody was in there. I knew that the guys had said they were spending the night in the tent, so this began to get me even more concerned. I ran over to my tent and shook my girlfriend awake and explained the situation. She was clearly tired, but I could tell she was just as concerned as I was. As we were talking about what to do, we both heard it, talking, coming from behind our tent. I was not sure what to do, but I knew sitting in the tent did not feel very safe anymore. I said to my girlfriend, "Pack the bags, fast, and be ready to leave if we have to." Then I grabbed a small pocket knife and quickly got out and looked over at the trees. I saw the two guys from earlier standing there, only a few feet from our tent. I recall this moment very clearly, as both guys looked at me with completely no emotion. They did not make any facial expressions or even move at all. I knew at that moment that these guys were planning on doing something terrible, They were not scared of me at all. A second later, my girlfriend looked out of the tent, which took me out of my state of shock, and I yelled at her to go, pointing at the trail back down the mountain. I followed after her, leaving my bag in the tent behind. I glanced back, just as we reached the edge of the campsite, and the two guys were still standing there. They did not even try to chase us or anything. They just stood and watched us as we ran away in complete fear. I would say we were full on running for 10 minutes before slowing down and walking fast for the rest of the way. When we got back to the car, we saw the other parked car was still there, but the passenger door was open again. I immediately drove us down to the closest gas station, where we called the police and were met by them a few minutes later to talk about what had happened. A few days passed by, and then we got a lot more information, and it made everything even more scary. When an officer went down to check the area, they found that the car belonged to an older man who had recently been filed as missing. All of the belongings from the car had been taken, and they were able to confirm that the tent on the campground was the old man's as well. They did not find the two guys, though, and they did not find any real evidence other than their shoe prints. The old man was not found either, and as far as I know, he still has never turned up. This made my girlfriend and I both feel sick, knowing that we could have been just seconds away from something terrible. I think we will never know for sure what those two guys were actually up to, but I think we can all make a pretty good guess based on the whole situation. But what I do know is that the image of those two guys standing in front of me still haunts my memories to this day. I was fortunate enough to have a job that allowed me to travel a lot in my late 20s and early 30s. I would usually only spend a couple of days in one location for work, though. So I was limited in how much I could actually do when I was staying somewhere nice. But I had a job out in Pennsylvania for a week and ended up finishing a day early, which meant I still had to stay there for an extra day before my flight. Since I never got to get out much, I thought I should use this time to my advantage and do something fun. I chose a long trail that went through some of the beautiful forests and trees there. I have always really enjoyed nature, but I felt like my job forced me to be inside buildings or planes all the time. So this was a good chance for me to enjoy the nice weather and scenery. I woke up early, but I actually had to go to the store to buy some hiking clothes, as I did not pack any with me. The trail was about an hour away from my hotel, and I ended up getting there just before 12 p.m. It did not look like anyone else was there, which I was quite happy about. When I looked up the trail online, it said it would take about 6 hours there and back. So this was pretty much an all-day thing. I had a little backpack with a water bottle and some snacks, so I brought that and started making my way down. The first hour was really nice. Just being alone on a path between the trees was peaceful. A nice way to get some relief from my stressful work life. He looked almost as though he was sleeping, with his head hanging down and a hoodie covering his face. As I started to get closer, he looked up at me, almost staring me down, as I walked past him. I had no idea what to make of him, but it was a little creepy. So I continued to check behind me a few times over the next few minutes as I continued down the trail. After a couple of hours, I got a little tired and hungry. So I found a small log on the edge of the path and sat down to have a snack. I was probably there for 3 or 4 minutes before the guy that I had walked past earlier appeared down the path, making his way toward me. He was still a good distance away though, so I quickly packed my bag and continued down the trail, so I would not have to talk with him. Clearly my plan did not work though. Only a few minutes later, I heard loud, running footsteps coming up behind me. I turned and saw the guy jogging in my direction. I moved over to the side, hoping he would just pass by, but he ended up stopping right in front of me. I will admit, I was quite nervous. I felt really uneasy about this guy. He did not say anything at first. Then he reached into his pocket and held out a wallet. He said, "I think you dropped this." The wallet certainly was not mine, and I could tell it was completely empty too. I told him he must be mistaken, that I did not even bring a wallet with me. He responded, telling me that he knew this was my wallet, and I needed to take it back. I honestly did not know what to do or say, but I could see it in his eyes. He was getting angry. I was pretty sure this guy was trying to pull some weird trick to rob me or something. But I did not know what other options I had, other than to just listen to him. So I said, "Okay," and picked up the wallet from his hand. Then he looked me in the eyes, smiled, and said, "You are welcome." Then he turned and began making his way down the trail. I stood there for a minute, trying to process the interaction. Then I held out the wallet and looked at it more closely. It was one of those typical brown folding wallets, worn and old. I opened it and checked every pocket inside, but there was not a single thing in there. I was so confused. I had no idea what to think, but I knew I did not want to run into that guy again. So I started making my way back to my car. It was 4 p.m. now, and I had a little over 2 hours to go before getting back. I tried my best to enjoy the walk, but I could not stop thinking about what had happened. It kept making me more and more nervous. I was constantly looking around to make sure he wasn't following me. But finally, I could see my car up ahead. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows over everything. My car was parked facing the trail, so I was walking toward the front of it. Once I was just a few feet away, that's when I noticed it. A shadow, a man's shadow, coming from behind the car, as if someone was crouched down. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the silhouette next to my car. I knew that running away would almost surely end badly, but I also knew he was probably planning to steal my car or rob me the moment I tried to get inside. After a few seconds, I quietly reached into my pocket to feel for my keys. Then I started walking toward the passenger door. I quickly unlocked the car and got in through that side. The moment I shut the door, I heard him jumping up and sprinting toward the driver's side. But I locked it from the inside just before he tried to open it. He started banging on the window as I crawled into the driver's seat and turned on the car. I could clearly see it was the same guy from earlier. He began screaming at me, yelling for me to give the wallet back. I ignored him. I reversed onto the main road and drove away as fast as I could. As I was pulling away, he ran back onto the path and disappeared into the trees. I think my plan had worked, assuming it threw him off by not going to the driver's side door and gave me enough time to get in and lock it. There was a police station I recalled seeing on the way, so I stopped there and went inside to report the guy and hand over the wallet. Then I headed back to the hotel. I called one of my friends that night to tell them about it. It was just such a crazy situation. It's quite obvious he was either trying to rob me or steal my car, but I still find myself questioning what the purpose of the wallet was, as it didn't seem to have any real significance. Anyway, I'm just happy I was able to make it out safely and without losing anything. I always carry a small pocket knife with me whenever I go for walks now. You never know what crazy situations you might find yourself in. It was near the end of October last year, which always makes for the best hiking weather, as it's not too hot and not too cold. I had a group of friends that I would go hiking with a lot, but most of them had jobs with no set schedules, which made it hard to find days where we could plan a hike together. So, often, I would go for some shorter hikes alone and just enjoy the peace and quiet. I had the weekend off, so I found a nice hiking and camping trail nearby and drove up there on Saturday morning. I had actually been on this trail a couple of years before and had always wanted to go back. It was a loop trail, so it basically went in a big circle from the start, and it was around a day and a half long. I parked my car in a small gravel lot and made my way up to the trailhead. The first few miles were flat and mostly went through grassy fields, before eventually leading into a forest at the bottom of a small mountain. At this point, it was probably midday, and I was well into the forest when I saw a guy walking up ahead. He was too far away for me to tell at first if he was walking toward me or away from me, but as I continued forward, I realized he was walking toward me. This was not a very popular trail, and the last time I hiked it, I don't think I saw anyone. But it was the weekend, and I thought maybe he just had the same idea as me. As he got closer, though, I noticed he did not have a backpack, and that was quite unusual. I was probably 6 or 7 hours down the trail, and there was no way someone would go this far without even a water bottle. He waved at me once he was a few feet ahead. I returned the gesture to be polite, but still stayed cautious, especially being in such an isolated area. As he passed, I heard his footsteps stop and the sound of dirt crumbling, as if he had turned around. I looked back, and sure enough, he was facing me. Then he asked me something really strange. "Where's your group at?" I was not sure how to respond. All I could really think about was whether this stranger somehow knew I usually hiked with others, or if he was just trying to find out if I was alone. Either way, it was unsettling. I replied, telling him they were on their way, just a couple minutes behind me. I could not think of anything else to say, but I definitely did not want him to think I was alone. "Good," he replied, then smiled and began walking again. I continued in the opposite direction, further down the trail. A few hours went by, and I spent most of that time thinking about that guy and how weird the whole situation was. The fact that he did not have a backpack so deep into the hike made it even more unsettling. I decided I would find a good place a little ways off the main trail to set up my campsite, just to be safe. I found a nice, flat area about half a mile from the trail and pitched my small tent. The sun was starting to set, so I sat outside my tent and just tried to stop thinking about the guy. I had a pre-packed lunch made for the trip, so I got that out and finished it before laying in the tent to try and get some sleep. I was laying there for probably over an hour, unable to sleep, before I started to hear footsteps coming from the trees behind my tent. I froze, listening to them move toward me. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was just an animal or something, but the steps were all too familiar, like a person's. It sounded like they were 15 to 20 feet away, when suddenly they stopped. I waited there for what felt like hours, lying still, listening carefully, my heart racing, but there were no more footsteps. I knew they had to be waiting nearby, because I would have heard the footsteps fade out if they would walked away. I knew I had to get out of there at some point, and I was so tired that I began questioning if maybe, just maybe, I had somehow missed them leaving. I unzipped the tent and lifted the flap a little to peek outside, but I did not see anything. So I got out and looked around. It was very quiet. The trees were blocking most of my view, but from what I could see, nobody was there. After a few minutes, I carefully packed up my tent, still looking around often because I was definitely on edge. Every small noise made me jump. I attached my tent to my bag and started heading back toward the trail as fast as I could. But I only made it a few steps before I noticed something. Clear footprints in the dirt, just behind a tree, right by where I had my tent. I began panicking. I did not even look for any more footprints. I just sprinted toward the trail. I was terrified now. I knew someone had been stalking me in the middle of an isolated forest, hours away from anywhere safe. Once I got back to the path, I quickly began walking back the way I came. It was probably faster to continue down the loop, but I figured whoever was watching me would probably expect that. Luckily, nothing else happened the whole way back to my car, which I did not reach until nearly sunset. I told my friends about the strange guy, what I heard, and what I saw. They all said the same thing. I was lucky to get out of there without anything worse happening. I contacted the police just to report the suspicious activity on the trail, but not much could be done about it. I'm certainly more careful when hiking and camping now, and I rarely go without my group of friends anymore.